There are many times in our life when people who are trying to give us direction will tell us to be careful about those we spend time with, be careful about the company you keep. And it's good advice whatever our ages are, wherever we're going. As we're finishing, Lord willing, this morning, Matthew chapter 10, Jesus begins with that idea. He's told them that they need to look and go out to the house of Israel. They're worthy people with a worthy message. Find a worthy house and share with them this message. And share this message that the kingdom of heaven is near. But realize that you'll not be received all the time in the way that you might expect. And there will be times when you'll need to dust the dust off your feet of certain houses and certain areas, certain cities. Just wipe the dust off and move on. Don't waste time in the wrong places with people not interested, but go to others and share this message with them. And then he talks to them, his disciples, not only about that which will occur on this limited trip, but he lets them see some of the things that will come later down the road. And he tells them to be on your guard against men, verse 17, who will hand you over to local councils and flog you in the synagogues, and talks about some of the other things the disciples would go through because they have that message of Jesus Christ. He begins to comfort them, if you will, beginning in verse 24. He says, a student is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the student to be like his teacher and the servant like his master. What he seems to be telling them is, it happens to me, it's going to happen to you. If I'm your master and you're the student, similar things will happen to each of us. And there are times when we're with certain people, and sometimes the things that happened to them will happen to us. And as we seek to give a message of light in a world of darkness, John 3 tells us, beginning in verse 19-20, that the light hates the darkness. And the darkness hates the light. And the darkness doesn't want to come into the light. It doesn't want to be exposed. And light always wins over darkness. And so Jesus is being realistic with them. He's telling them the truth. He wants them to know what's going to happen. And it certainly does. But he says in verse 26, so do not be afraid of them. Do not be afraid of them. People will flog us. People will kick us out of the synagogues. People will rebel against us. People will what? Don't be afraid of them. And he says, don't. But there is something to be afraid of. Not of them. He says, don't be afraid of them. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. He seems to be telling us that sometimes people will do these things out of the public view. Maybe they won't see it. Maybe they won't learn about it then. But there will be a time when all of this will be made known. It will be brought out into the light. And certainly that happens in many cases at judgment. There are times when things are done and said against us because we believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Because we have a belief about God as Creator. There's so many in the world today that want to look at us and say we're foolish. In fact, we're uneducated if we don't believe in evolution as they would believe in it. And it's a statement or a question that when answered a certain way either brings a confidence in their opinion of us, or they can then very quickly look down upon us and look at us as being uneducated, ignorant. You believe in what? How many days? He did what? He said what? Yes, I believe in Yahweh. I believe in the God of heaven and earth. And I have no regrets. And I'm very bold in that. And I don't mind what you say, and I don't care what you think about me. That is true, whether you believe it or not. And one day it will be revealed as truth to you, but it will be too late. But there are things that will be made light, brought into the light, made clear. But maybe not in my lifetime. I so wished it would be clear to so many people around me, we think from time to time. And so there are things that will be revealed. But he says, what I tell you in the dark, in other words, it's not that it's nighttime. I'm telling you something that's not clear right now. It's not out in the open right now. But what I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. And what is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the housetops. And so maybe there's a method that's being used and there's a reason for it, and we're at certain places now rather than being at other places. Maybe we're saying it in a different way now, but ultimately I want you to proclaim it from the housetops. Let everyone know, let everyone hear what we're talking about. And he says, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. And he's already said, don't be afraid. Now he's going one step further. Don't be afraid just generally. Now he's saying, don't be afraid of those who can, what? What did you say? Kill the body? They can kill me? Will that happen? To everyone but John. Exiled to an island, all alone because of his faith. Others martyred because of their faith. Do not be afraid of those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. In other words, they can't affect your eternity. You die and you're passing through, passing over, going through a sleep process, if you will, passing into eternity. And so he wanted them to realize that, and he wants us to reach that point. That whatever man might do to us, whatever the peer pressure might be forcing upon us, there's a point to where they can't touch my soul. They can't affect my soul unless I give in, unless I change, unless I deny that which I believe. And he's dealing with that in a moment. Be strong, don't be afraid, and don't for certain be afraid of those who can only put you to death, but can't affect your eternal position. But then, listen carefully, but rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. If you're going to be afraid of something, be aware and be agitated toward, or be aware to the point of fearing that circumstance of being cast into hell, because they can affect your soul, and that's God. There is one who can affect the soul, as it would suggest eternal judgment. And our actions matter in this life. Even at the point of death, they matter in this life. And there's one that we better be aware of. And there's a reverential fear here. There's a reverence for the one who can destroy the body and soul. And the results of where your actions could place you, hell, eternal damnation. So be aware of that and be aware of it as you're going through these circumstances, and be aware of it as you're around these dangers. Now, from the extreme statement, Jesus gets very simplistic, very simple. And I want us to listen as carefully and take it in as fully as is possible this morning. Because there are times when we are facing struggles and we are facing pressures, and sometimes we're not quite sure what to say. Sometimes we're silent. Later we regret that silence. That was a chance to say something good for the cause of Christ. That was a chance to offer an opportunity. They've given that to me to say something about my belief in Jesus Christ. Why didn't I? Why didn't I? And so when we go through those circumstances and we are afraid and we don't say what we ought to say, and we look back and say, why am I so afraid of these people? Why am I so afraid of this peer pressure? Why is it bothering me so much? And why is it bothering me so much now? Oh no, God can't love me. Look what I just did not do. Or look what I just did. God can't love me the way I want Him to. He notices these things. He remembers these things. Why? And the questions and the guilt. And then for sure we don't feel very solid or strong in the sight of God. We've let Him down. And we shrink sometimes in our thinking of His awareness or His care for us. And He draws attention, and I'm convinced at that time there must have been a sparrow somewhere close to them as He was talking. And He reminds them of a worship experience, of how they were ready to go into the synagogue area and the temple area, and they were wanting to worship God, and they were very poor. Many of the Jews were at that time. They lived meal to meal, very poor. But when they went to offer sacrifice, they offered the sacrifice, and they could only afford the smallest of sacrifices, and that was the sparrow. They could afford only the smallest of sacrifices. And listen to what Jesus says. He says, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny?" Now let's do math for a moment. And while we do the math, turn to Luke 12. Matthew says 2 sparrows sold for a penny. And that's a sarion. It's the smallest of numbers, if you will, the smallest of coins in the Greek, the word asarion. 2 sparrows sold for a penny. 2 for 1. Luke tells us, verse 6, "Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies?" And be sure you get the point. 2 sparrows for 1, 5 for 2, which means in good economics, buy 2 and you get 1 free. Or buy 4 and you get 1 free. Depending on Matthew's account, 2 for 1. Luke's account, you buy 5 for 2 pennies. So buy 4 and you get 1 free. From Luke's account. And what is he telling us? God is the God of the 5th sparrow. Listen carefully. God is the God of the 5th sparrow that's thrown in free. Not even a number attached to him. No worth at all. It's the one that's given to you for free because you bought the 4 for 2 pennies. But what does he say about the 5th sparrow? God's the God of the 5th sparrow. Luke says, "Yet not one of them is forgotten by God." Not one of them is forgotten by God. Go back to Matthew 10. "And yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father." So the God of the 5th sparrow remembers every sparrow that flies or falls from the sky. And you are worth more than many sparrows. And that's something we need to put on our refrigerators. We need to put it in our billfolds and read it from time to time. When we don't feel as if God is there, don't feel as if He's aware, don't know what He thinks. And God tells us, it sounds trite when you think about it, but realize the God of heaven and earth does not forget, and it doesn't pass from His memory a single sparrow that is upon the earth or that falls from the sky. God is the God of that 5th sparrow. And think about how much more valuable you are than many sparrows. the disciples would have understood it more because they went through a sacrificial system, and sometimes they would buy the least of the sacrifices that were available. And they probably had buy 4 and here's 1 free, and here you can have this one, as they may have turned and handed it to someone else as they would then go offer that sacrifice to God. God says each of us is valuable in His eyes. We're worth more than anything because of the soul within us, created beings, yes, but a soul that points to eternity and wants us to move our soul to that eternity. Not the one that would destroy body and soul, but to move to the one who knows us, who values us, who wants us to feel that value intrinsically no matter what we go through day by day. You are worth more than many sparrows. Doesn't mean as much to us, but you are worth so much to God. And He would never forget about you. By comparison, sure, if it's true about sparrows, of course I can take that. I can understand that. And I can take it within my soul of souls and act upon it day by day when difficult things happen. And when I don't feel as if I've measured up, and when I have failed miserably, and when I don't feel His presence or act as if He's not there. You are valuable to God. You're valuable. Jesus is telling the disciples and us, but that's not all He tells us. He says, even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Luke says the same thing, the same wording. I had someone point this out to me a number of years ago. It made an impression. I shared it once here. Those of you who've heard it, just hear it again. Take it in again and let it have meaning again in your life. How many hairs do you have? Those who read Martin Lloyd-Jones know that those who are red-haired have a certain number of hairs, generally speaking. Some black hairs, a certain number. Those who are blonde, a certain numbers. Those who have brown or brunette hair, certain numbers. They've gone to the trouble to figure out that depending on the color of hair that we have, the numbers vary slightly. And so they've taken it to an extreme to really come to an understanding, wow, the hairs of our head, there's a certain number there. But that doesn't give us the meaning that's intended here. And I've used the example before, count the audience. And someone counted us this morning. They've written it down, I hope. Hopefully it's in the bulletin. So it helps us to track numbers, helps us to see how we're doing, helps us to anticipate at certain times of the year or on certain days. The flow of the crowd will be different, the numbers. How many are here this morning? My guess, about 112. About 112. 15, 20 more in the back, probably, maybe more. So let's just imagine 130 are in this building today. Who's number 7? And 17? And 92? And 121? That's what this verse is telling us. Your hairs on your head are not counted, they're numbered. Every one has a number to God. Every one of us, our hairs are numbered to God. We're more valuable than many sparrows. The hairs of our head have numbering to them. I heard someone speak a number of years ago. He was probably the first one who made this scripture real to me and others when he talked about it. He talked about how when he would get up in the morning, he was older, he was losing some of his hair, and sometimes some of the hair would be on the sink. And he began to realize, wait a minute, I'm losing the hair on my head. And when he read this verse, he says, I lost number 22 and 46 this morning. And we laughed because we were beginning to get what's being taught here. Some of us may have lost a couple this morning when we brushed our hair. And we have a few less than we did this morning. But don't miss the point. Every hair on your head, God attaches a number to it. And why in the world would we ever feel as if He doesn't care about us? Or why would we think He doesn't notice us? Why would we think we're not valuable to Him? And so when we comb our hair in the morning, and whatever we're doing that day, it needs to sink in again and again and again and again. You are loved and valued by the God of heaven and earth. And so go out there and act like it and live like it. And know that the master and the student go through similar things. And because we wear the name Christian, there are things that will happen to us because of that name, the name we wear. Remember, our Master died on the cross. He was persecuted by great numbers of people, but when they realized who He was, they changed immediately. They repented of those things. Their lives changed drastically, and they died for the cause of Christ in that first and second and third and 21st century. As people are dying in our time because of their belief that Jesus is the Son of God. Your hair tells you how valuable you are to God. Having received that, He says, whoever acknowledges me before men, I will acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. If you're not ashamed of me on earth, I'll not be ashamed of you at judgment. But if you disown me before men, I will disown you before my Father in heaven. This is important and it's real. And the influence is needed in this life. And just understand that if you're ashamed of me here, it's going to be that way there. If you acknowledge me here, it will be that way then. And that's important. We can't deny that fact. These verses are super, super clear. The love and appreciation God has for us, the hairs on our head are numbered. No sparrow falls to the ground except that it's remembered by God. It happens according to God's will. We fit into that way of thinking. But because we are of that way, using a term in Acts that was said about the Christians, the way, we've got to act a certain way. Do not suppose that I've come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. And all he's telling us is when we stand up for the cause of Christ, sometimes family members don't like it. And sometimes it's divisive in the religious thinking of family members. What I'm believing may not be what they were taught, and it may not be what you were taught. Believing in Jesus Christ is divisive, even in some homes. And you need to know that, disciples. You need to know that, apostles. You need to know that, people of America and Madeira in 2015. Sometimes your own family won't agree with what you believe about God and about Christ and about the church, about the value of the Bible. And so it comes across as being divisive, and it's like a sword instead of peace. And anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. At some point in my life, I realized that my father and my mother loved God more than me. My children realized that at one point too. I love God more than my children, more than my wife. And yet I would die for them. I would. No doubt in my mind. I would die for those people. And yet, God is over them in my affections. And yet, what are we saying? I'm willing to die for Him. I'm willing to deny self for Him. We know what it feels like. We deny self for Him, and we know what it feels like to deny self for those loved ones. But God deserves and demands first place in my life. And so I love Him more than my family sometimes. And the things I say or do toward my family will be because of that. They may not like me. They may not like the things I decide that we're doing when they lived in my household and I was in charge, and my love for God superseded my love for them, and we're acting on that love. And they see it and sense it and know it, and then it gives them, hopefully, the standard and the opportunity to choose it for themselves. I talked to parents in times past who didn't love God more than their children. They give in to some of the things their children wanted to do at certain times, and it was kind of difficult to understand. What's more important to us? Look at my calendar. What's more important? What does this say today? What does this say? And yet there are also some who don't have any regard at certain periods of time, and it stretches into weeks and months and maybe years, when it's as if there's not a God in focus in this family. And I've told them sometimes, and you're putting your children in a position to not hear from you about the God of heaven and earth. But you're asking someone when they leave your influence, hopefully that they will then teach your children what's most important, spiritually speaking. And when I went into campus ministry, I was in a certain situation to where they were looking to others outside of their family because they had not seen in their family what they were seeing at that state university with those 115 students who were gathering regularly to put Christ first on the state university campus. They didn't receive that at home. And it's something that can happen, but we can't rely upon it happening. Our children may not leave home and go to an environment where they'll hear that focus and see that example and choose that later in life and die for the cause of Christ. It's up to us. It's up to us. And I've encouraged too in my life to go and tell your children that you failed them because they had just said they had. Go tell your children. Go tell your children that you didn't put Christ first in your life when they were at home, and you apologize and you've repented of it, and you want them to know that you should have. And hearing that, maybe they'll think about it, and maybe they'll be open, and maybe something will change in their life now because it didn't happen then. But I've come, and if you don't love anyone who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And that word was the word used in the beginning of the chapter. A worthy person and a worthy message and a worthy home and a worthy city. And now it points back at us. Are you worthy of me? Do you love me above family members? Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What he's telling us is that sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes my focus isn't what it ought to be, and sometimes I just don't know what I'm to do. I don't know who I'm to follow. I don't know the kind of life I'm supposed to live. But when you find your life, when you do find your life, you'll lose it. And we lose it for His sake. Suddenly the cause of Christ is everything to us, and that's when we've found it again. And worthiness is again in the picture. He who receives you receives me. And he who receives me receives the one who sent me. Who is that? God. When they receive you, they receive me. When they receive me, they receive God. And anyone who receives a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And anyone who receives a righteous man because he's a righteous man will receive a righteous man's reward. Our choices in life have an eternal factor involved. In their position, as we talk about that student and that master again, now we move and we're talking about one who's a prophet or a righteous man. And accepting one or not accepting one, there's that comparison. And who are we with and who are we against and who have we chosen and what group are we a part of and where's the peer pressure coming from? Let the peer pressure come from the prophets. Let the peer pressure come from the eternal beings. Let the peer pressure come from the righteous people. Let that be the peer pressure that we respond to, Jesus is saying, not other peer pressure. And you know how to make that fit, and you know how that's real day by day. And if anyone gives a cup of cold water to one of these little ones because he is my disciple, I tell you the truth, he will certainly not lose his reward. There are times in my life and times in your life when we will want to do big things. When we've taken a stand. When we want to show ourselves to be worthy of this one who's doing the speaking, who set the example, the student compared to the master, the Christian compared to the prophet, the righteous person. And what Jesus gets it ultimately down to is the smallest common denominator. Again, the sparrow, the hair on your head, every single little act that we do for the cause of Christ has a reward attached to it. Even something as simple as giving a cup of cold water to someone, absolutely. Do good for the cause of Christ. Whatever little it is, there's a reward attached to it. Do it because he is my disciple. And that's why we do some of the little things day to day, some of the habitual things we do as a congregation. It's not the greatest thing, it's not the huge numbers, but little by little it makes a difference. And little by little, when we're doing it because we believe in him, because we're a disciple, the word here, not an apostle, but a learner, a follower, there's reward. And it's important for me and you this morning to know that it's okay to do something because of the reward that we'll receive in heaven. It's okay. It's okay. He's already forced us to deal with the other side, hasn't he? Be afraid of the one who can kill both soul and body. He's already forced us to deal with eternal things, things outside of this existence. Would do the little things for me, even something as simple as a cup of cold water, and there's reward for that. And so we leave this morning not afraid, but pumped up and excited because the God of heaven and earth knows me and you. And you're important to him. So am I. But so are you. And the little things we do, we may not ever be called to die for the cause of Christ, but we're called every day to deny self and choose him. We're called every day in our homes to deny family members. If they ask me to do something that would not be according to God's will, I've got to make a choice. It's an easy choice if we understand God's will is first in my life. And we can discuss it with them and be respectful and help them understand. I'm not doing that. That's not according to God's will, and he's the one most important to me. But as we do that with our children growing up, they'll grow up thinking the same way, and they'll grow up doing similar things, and that reward is something we hold on to. That's not why we do it, but it's the result of doing those things. I saw an expression this week that I think is going to change my life, although I think I knew it. Gratitude is not just one of those good virtues, it said. Gratitude is apparent to all the others. I thought. I think that's true. An attitude of gratitude. I've heard that many years of my life. But that attitude of gratitude is the parent of so many other good virtues that need to be a part of my life. And of course, that gratitude keeps me from complaining and thinking as if someone's holding out on me and all the other sides of life. It's the reason we do the things we do. Because the God of heaven and earth did not just tell me this morning that I know the number of hairs on your head, but I sent my son to die for you. If you were the only one, I sent my son to die for you. And you, 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 and me. And what am I going to do about that? Someone died for me. They gave their life for me. What am I going to do? This morning we stand to sing a song and we get to choose again. What will I do? What will I do? In view of this lesson, in view of this understanding, in view of whatever the schedule is this day and this week and this year, will it be clear who's first in my life? If not, choose him. Put him on in baptism. Respond to him as Messiah, Savior, but also Lord. And follow him to the best of your ability, knowing the reward that will be there. Let's stand and sing that song of encouragement. 'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus, just to take him at his word, just to rest upon his promise, just to know thus said the Lord. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I prove him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. Oh, how sweet to trust in Jesus, just to trust his